You're listening to the Outdoors Group podcast. This podcast is a call to arms to get children and young people outside again. It's your one-stop shop for all things outdoor, child, young person and education related. Thanks for tuning in. Today I'm on Teams and I'm so delighted to be chatting to Rob Himburg, who is over in Michigan on the other side of the pond. Rob is the director of Upland Hills School, a school whose philosophy is that the natural world is a primary teacher. They take what they call a love-based approach to education with a strong emphasis on ecological awareness and nature connectedness. This school is connected to an organic farm and that is crucial to a large part of their curriculum. Rob's joined me today to talk about their approach to education, his dedication to transforming traditional educational models, and his passion for supporting neurodiverse young people and their families. Thanks for joining me today, Rob.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
No, you're welcome. I think that might have been one of my longest intros for a while. There was a lot to cover. So I think best place to start, though, would be by hearing about your background and what's led you to the place that you find yourself in today.
Oh, sure. Yeah, thank you. Well, that's being a little bit older now, 53 years into life. The background could take a while, so I'll attempt to be
the highlights.
Succinct. Yes, the highlights. Well, I think getting to where you are in any moment, is somehow the sum of your whole life to that point, right? So I would say for me, when I just really think about my life as a child, I'm surrounded by children in my role here at Upland Hills, and I think it tends to make you think about your own childhood more often. And I realized I always had, in addition to a high degree of like physical energy and a need for physical activity from a very, very young age and still to this day, like an insatiable curiosity for, how people work and how the world works and what's going on. And, I spent my childhood in the 70s in between Michigan and Southern California. So I was either climbing trees and playing in the woods or swimming and doing things in the ocean. When I lived in California, I was just constantly outside and loved it for all of the reasons, that we know now and have known for ages are so important about kids being outside. But at that time, I was just a kid who had a ton of energy and loved doing all these things. And of course, got into athletics, and that, led me down all kinds of good roads and good outlet for, for energy and all the socialization that comes with that. And, and having mentioned curiosity about people in the mind, that led me to studying psychology when I went to college. So I continued kind of the athletic career. I actually rowed. I was on a crew team in college, and that was really critical for me to find kind of my social group and to have that kind of outlet during college. While I was studying psychology, and a good friend who I made in college was a backpacker and introduced me to backcountry hiking and camping, and a bunch of us did some trips, and that was a really pivotal moment for me. It was the first time I had spent extended time in the backcountry, in the outdoors, with everything you need, on your back, and in these incredibly beautiful, vast environments. And that really pushed me toward going to graduate school and studying a mix of psychology and ecology, focusing more in behavioral and cognitive psychology. And I did that in North Carolina, so I had access to the ocean again and beautiful mountains, and just continued love of the outdoors and camping and backpacking. And that's kind of stuck with me throughout my professional career. So when I became the counselor at this really wonderful school out in the Bay Area near San Francisco, back again in California, they let me start an outdoor education program where I was able to take kids out on trips and do educational programming and adventure programming. And so that school actually was a school for dyslexic learners, which was a real masterclass for me in my life on understanding kind of the different ways that different types of people learn and the different types of environments that are conducive for learning, depending on kind of who you are and how you learn best. So I really kind of dove into that and the idea of the environment being really critical to learning and development, more so than how we identify a particular learner, whether
Mm.
it's a language-based learning difference like dyslexia, or an attentional thing that we call ADD or ADHD, or all the different kinds of labels that we have for how kids learn and how people learn. To be in this incredible environment in this school where these kids were thriving and learning what I needed to do to create an environment so that they could learn to their potential. And that's really kind of what launched me into a world of education and running schools, and led me to where I am now, Upland Hills School, which is sort of the kind of the dream realized,
Yeah.
of all the ways I think that children ought to spend their days in school.
Nice. So you joined Upland Hill School a decade ago, over a decade ago, in 2013, right? So
Yeah,
how long had the school been going at that point? Can you tell us a bit about the history of the school?
yeah, of course. Oh my gosh. So the school started really piloted in 1970.
Okay.
And so there was a family who came to the area where the school is now, which was very rural at that time. And the matriarch, had been a teacher at a school in sort of the Metro Detroit area, which is not too far, and really felt like the Detroit was really growing and moving out into the suburbs and exurbs at that time, and so they wanted to come further away and start a farm that then became the Upland Hills Farm School.
Nice.
And so she started it with a small group of dedicated families in 1970. And then just a year later, actually, it's a really neat story. Her son, one of their children, one of their sons, was traveling in Spain, was driving a motorcycle around Spain, and ran into an old friend who had been a camp counselor together with him in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And this was Phil Moore and his wife Karen, and told Phil and Karen about this amazing school that his mom had just started, and how much he thought Phil and Karen would like the philosophy and the ways of the school, and that when they got back to the U.S. ought to look into it. So, of course, one thing led to another, and Phil and Karen came to the school, and Phil was then hired as the director of the school, where he remained for 42 years until I arrived just over a decade ago. And so the school really grew up around the leadership of Phil and Karen and the other dedicated
Mm.
teachers, who many were here for 20, 30 plus years, leading up to my arrival, and other teachers who were sort of like second, third generation, which is really unusual for a school that's almost 55 years old.
Yeah. And so obviously you said it started quite small. How many kids are there now?
Now our school is full at 90 students, and
Okay.
so it's quite small. It's the equivalent of about 9 grades. So our students
Okay.
enter around 5 years old, and then they graduate and move on to high school, or what we call high school, at around 14 years old.
Okay. So they're with you for that whole chunk, which is lovely, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it really is.
So on your website, there's a little video that explains about the school and that uses the phrase love-based education, and you kind of talk about loving a child into being. Can you explain to us what you kind of mean by that kind of phrasing and that kind of philosophy?
Yeah, of course. And again, this really comes from the rich history of the school. That phrase and all of sort of the philosophy behind it really came from those founding teachers, and Phil and Karen, the founding directors. So when we say loving a child into being, or having a love-based school, it means sort of a mix of things that I think all together become sort of that gestalt idea of it being greater than the parts. But for us, loving a child into being really has a lot to do with seeing them as having, sort of unlimited potential as human beings. And our job is to create an environment that allows for them to explore their interests, their passions, to develop goals, to work hard toward those goals in a way that the environment is supporting them, and they're often leading that learning so that they have agency, right? So they really own the learning and feel all of the sense of purpose that can come with that. And so, like, in all those different ways, we think of that as we're all beings in development at any age. And so we see this as a really critical time for our kids, our students, to have an opportunity to come into their lives as students and as children, and then as young adults, in a way that is true to who they are and in their soul and spirit. Mm-hmm.
So it's very child-centered, or
Absolutely.
like learner-led, as we sometimes say. Yeah. Oh, amazing. So what's the that's obviously the kind of the heart of the school, but if like a parent's coming around, how do you explain to them, like, kind of in layman's terms, what it kind of looks like?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I get to ask that all the time. Well, what in the world, what does that mean, a love-based education? Well, first of all, I'll say underneath it all, or alongside it all, I should say, is a full, like, comprehensive academic program. So our kids are engaged, academically, building skills the way you would expect any school to do. Although sort of maybe our methods for doing it, or the way we get from A to B, might look non-traditional, or might look really unique. But I think a good example right now, I was just talking with, we call them our seniors, when a student's in their last year at our school. And so I'll just use this as a good example. I think it's something I might tell parents who are interested in what we're doing. So when you're in your final year here, we do something called the Senior Project. And it's really meant to be a way that students can honor their time here by creating something for the school and the community that reflects an aspect of their lives here that they feel was really significant in their growth and development. And what we know too is it's a sort of a capstone piece that gets at that sense of agency and purpose, where students can have an idea and then be supported to take that idea all the way to fruition until they've got a finished, tangible project. And so,
amazing.
Yeah, it's really a really wonderful aspect of the school program that, again, like so many things here, has been going on for years and years and years, decades, really. And so two seniors are partnering to build a new root cellar for our school, because we have a really robust garden and food program here that they both love. Not only do they love eating massive amounts of food because they're 14-year-old boys, but they volunteer in the food, what we call the food truck, in our kitchen. They take classes that we offer in there, and they work in the garden in the summer sometimes. And so they were really motivated to build this kind of unique sort of geodesic top cob, like straw bale cob root cellar, so that we can extend the growing season here, or like not really extend the growing season, but extend our ability to store and preserve and then make food for our food program. So I'd say that's a good example of a love-based education, because you've got kind of that full circle moment where something that's been of high interest and value to a student, and they're able to pursue that interest, and then it becomes something that they explore through their passion and interest, and then it becomes goal oriented, and then we give them, a tangible kind of outcome or goal to go for. And then with some support from the community, depending on the project, then they're able to see that through over the course of an entire school year, which feels really significant, to a 14-year-old to, go from design and an idea to a fully formed and finished product. I think is really important at the age that they are, because it's very much centered around their own ideas and their own interests. And yet by moving through that, you end up with something that serves the community. And so for us, that's kind of an all around sort of love-based approach to teaching and learning.
Yeah, amazing. And that's such a lovely example of that kind of final project for them. And I think it leads really nicely into talking about the role of nature in the school. Um, and so, yeah, tell us about about the farm and how that kind of weaves into your kind of curriculum and the heartbeat of the school.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, of course, we were founded as Upland Hills Farm School, so you can't
Mm.
really separate the school from the farm, or the
Yeah,
farm from the school. And over all these years, it's taken on different forms. Most recently, though, we've had a pretty vibrant vegetable garden that we have run as a CSA, a community supported agriculture
oh,
program.
nice.
So yeah, so our families and local families in the community can buy into the CSA, and then receive you know uh, organically grown vegetables all summer. And it also then we want to produce enough so that we can feed our own program, so to
Yeah,
speak. And so really what we're looking for is a full circle kind of experience for our children, so that they're thinking about the food they like to eat and what are the ingredients. So of course, pizza is popular food for probably most kids,
yeah,
at least our kids here. And so they get really excited about growing the herbs that go into the sauce, and growing the tomatoes. We don't grow a lot of wheat, so we don't really are making our own flour, so to speak. But
yeah,
they'll do things like that, where they're going from what do we want on the menu next year, to what seeds do we need to buy, to when do we need to get those in the ground. Then of course all the tending and maintenance and all that hard work. It's really hard work to grow food, with all the unpredictability of the weather, and
mm,
the other animals that love to eat the food too, and bugs and things like that. But there's so much learning involved in there, and so and all the hard work, and you get to harvest time, and then preservation, and then you're eating it for lunch the next fall. And and all aspects of that cycle, or that circle, offer almost limitless opportunities for curriculum and curriculum development
yeah.
at all levels. And so that's something we're really excited about, and trying to do more and more of every
Yeah.
year.
Oh, amazing. So it's not just about growing the food, but the kids might be planning what they're going to grow and where they're going to grow it and all those kinds of things as well.
Yes, absolutely. And with this, with our food program too, we can get into, of course, the preservation of food, whether we're pickling or canning, or making sauce and things like that. But also there's, kind of the economics of it. So we can get into not only how do we understand, value and sort of the financial aspect of growing our
Mm,
own food, but we can look at other kinds of costs, like environmental costs. Our environmental footprint for all the food we grow is tiny, because you can literally walk from the garden to the school and the kitchen. So there's those kinds of learning opportunities as well, and that's really important, given the strong sort of environmental ecological aspect, learning aspect, that's been a part of the school since its inception, that we're able to show that in a time today where it feels still very relevant, and of course is incredibly important.
yeah, absolutely. And as well, do they spend time outside in addition to the farm doing other bits and pieces? Like you were talking about how you developed the outdoor education program at one of your previous kind of workplaces. Are there other kind of outdoor recreational things that the children are doing as well? Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. Our kids spend a lot of time outdoors each day, and some
Mm,
of it is just absolutely their time,
yeah.
unstructured, imaginative, free play. Is so important for growth and development, and
Mm,
I feel like parents and grandmothers and wise elders have known that for ages and ages, and now we can point to some really compelling science and research and neuroscience, to back up the importance of allowing children time to play in their own way. And we're really fortunate here. So we are properties on about 30 wooded acres with lots of, especially right now, vernal ponds that are overflowing with all the spring rain. But then we're adjacent, of course, to Upland Hills Farm that's about 250 acres. And so there's just a tremendous amount of open space and woodland for our kids to play. And they're out there, building forts and climbing trees and playing in the woods and in the fields all the time, each day. And then we have some other structured ways for them to be out there too. We have a high ropes course and a zip line that's part of our program. Yeah, it's really, really, really fun. And then the farm, where they've been so generous with our students and with our schools. So we go over there once a week, especially in the spring, because there's lots of new life over at the farm, lots of baby animals being born. And so once a week, kids will spend a couple hours at a time over there, either caring for the new animals or doing some chores, and then also just a lot of playing, just a lot of having fun over there too.
Real fun. Oh, amazing. So I mean, it sounds like you were just saying about having lots of unstructured time to play. And I guess that's part of what we're saying. I think you said in the video as well about trusting children's intelligence and kind of giving them a choice over their learning. So in practice, what does it look like in terms of what does a day look like at the school for like a typical young person that you're working with?
Yeah, so a typical day, students arrive and there's a little time in the morning, especially the younger they are. Once school starts, there's a good bit of time for them to socialize and play and kind of get into the rhythm of the day. And then we have what we call our morning meeting or lessons happening. Then there's a big break time in kind of mid-morning to have a snack and a break, and kids are out doing all the playing they're doing, and then they'll come back and go into other lessons until around midday. And then our afternoon is really where we've structured a lot of, we call them here afternoon program classes. Sometimes here they're called electives or specials. Okay. And those are all the classes that our staff and then other people in our community who have a certain area of expertise or interest will offer classes for our students to take.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's really fun. We slot those into the afternoon hours, and the cool part is we let the children choose the classes themselves. And so some classes, like going to the farm, which I just mentioned, is open to every child in the school. So as young as 5 and as old as 14 can be in that group together when they go to the farm. And other classes may be geared more toward certain groups of ages, depending on the class. But those range from, anything from origami to theater production to podcasting class, actually. Could be a coding class, and it could be outside fun. We have sort of natural science classes, which are woods walks, and we have a syruping and swamping class right now because we like to tap the maple trees and get the sap and make syrup. And so those classes are all open to the students to make their own choices about which ones they want to pursue and where their interests are and how they want to explore it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And how, if those classes are open to everyone, how would the person running it, obviously it'd be very different if you've got a 5-year-old and a 13-year-old on the same class. Do they just kind of adapt the content depending on the kids that are within the group?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times the content can be complementary to what's going on in the more sort of structured academic portion of their day. And so sometimes the classroom teacher, knowing that, let's say her or his 6 and 7 year olds are going over to the farm, they might incorporate something about what they know will be happening at the farm into their lesson. Or it can also work the other way around, where over at the farm or in the swamp or doing origami, whatever it may be, to incorporate what that teacher knows is happening in those students' classrooms. So that kind of transition goes back and forth, and
Yeah.
and a lot of times too, it's a lot of exploration. So we don't try and hold too tight to making sure that there's an exact parallel between what they're doing sort of from a skill-based perspective or academically during the
Mm.
morning to that afternoon. There's always so many ways to build it in and to
Yeah.
incorporate it. And so we're just always on the lookout for how we're going to do that.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a lot of pre-planning that goes into those classes,
Yeah.
and a lot of rhythm, to the seasons and to our year, so we can anticipate how we'll teach those classes and what those students will be learning, based on, the structure that exists every year.
Yeah, amazing. And so I was just thinking about it actually. It's not on one of the kind of prepared question lists, but in terms of that, so like in the UK, we have quite a big community of kids who are home educated, and one of the things that the home ed parents often say is that they love the mixed ages, because they're saying like in our school system, you're just with other 5-year-olds or other 8-year-olds, but it sounds like you guys have got the opportunity for these kids to mix with the ages and have those kind of benefits of being in those mixed age groups. So how is that for you guys? Like, it feels like maybe it's more community based by doing it that way.
Yeah, it really is. That's a great insight. And our classrooms are a little bit mixed aged they exist on
Okay.
their own. So each classroom is the equivalent of about 2 academic years.
Okay.
And so there's a range there just to begin with. But then when we do those afternoon classes and mix up the groups quite a bit, there's that very wonderful mentoring that goes on, and the
Mm.
peer-to-peer learning and teaching that goes on. And it's really both ways. Of course, it's easy to think about how the older students might be mentoring or leading the younger ones. And sometimes we do that in a very like intentional way. Like we'll say when we group up over at the farm, like who's looking out for who and making sure everybody gets back and is doing the right thing. And then there's just all the modeling that happens, those little ones looking up to the bigger kids, and taking a lot of cues from how they're interacting and how they're behaving and what they're saying. But the same goes the other way too, as so many times both my children who went all the way through the school are in what we call high school now, and they talk all the time about in their last year or two here how much they loved being with the younger kids, because it reminded them of so many wonderful things about being that age. And I think it
Mm.
gave them sort of permission to be in a more childlike state and to be more imaginative and to feel freer, because sometimes being 13, 14 can feel like a different kind of pressure than earlier
Yes.
childhood. So yeah, I think that there's huge value in having mixed aged groups of children together, often on a regular, consistent basis, and sometimes with a lot of intention around it, and
Yeah.
sometimes just letting it be.
Just organically letting it be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right. Because I always, when we talk about this, just, you know, in off the podcast, people always use the example of, a 14-year-old teaching a 6-year-old how to do something and how nice that is to see. But I hadn't really thought so much about it the other way around. And of course, you're right that there must be so much learning the old ones can take as well.
Yeah.
And you're right, because for teenagers at the moment, they do have a lot of pressures on them. And one of the things that I've talked to other podcast guests about is the kind of climate anxiety, which is prevalent in a lot of teenagers. And I'm really enjoying probing and hearing other educators' kind of experience of this, particularly when you guys are in a different country from us. So what's your experience of kind of climate anxiety, and how do you address it with the young people that you're working with?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and it is of course, pervasive and really challenging. I think wherever you find yourself in the world, and particularly Here we've got our own challenges, and I think I think a lot about when I hear sort of the sort of environmental pioneers that I think we all look up to. People like Jane Goodall and Sylvia Earle and Thomas Berry, people who've been sort of leading the environmental movement for so long. And you think, wow, if anyone would feel distraught at this point, it might be the people who've been talking about this for 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
But surprisingly, to me at least, when I hear them talk about what's next or what to do or how they're feeling, what I really love and have kind of held on to is this notion that the optimism lies in the fact that we already have the answers. Like, we already know what to do to regain the health and sustainability that we need long term for our natural environments, for our planet. And so starting from there, I think, gives a sense of hope that is grounded in the potential for action. And I think that's really what, for us, and in my opinion, I guess, I think really can help young people deal with this sort of existential, worry or anxiety around in environment and environmental issues, is action. I think that's kind of the antidote for a lot of it. And so like that example about the root cellar, it's a very small first step, that's really going to have an impact on our little community here in this small town in Michigan. But I think that's where it kind of all starts, and so my hope is that these guys, move on thinking when you see something that needs action, or you see a problem that needs solving, or at least if the problem's too big to solve, at least some forward action, some forward thinking and some action, that you can find adults around you who will support you and help you. That when you speak up about your concerns, there are adults who will listen and respond and take you seriously. And then they'll go about supporting you, finding ways to positively impact your local environment, your local community. And so for us, I think that's kind of where we feel we can make authentic progress, or there can be authentic learning with our students, is by being in action around the things that are really important to them, and create positive change as a stepping stone for how their adult lives might look when maybe their voice is able to broadcast a little further, and they're able to do a little more.
Yeah, well, that's such a great answer. I think you're right. I think doing things, being productive and seeing change is so inspiring to them, isn't it? To be like, oh, I've done this little thing, and so what's next? And stepping stone it, scaffolding. That's what I was thinking. Scaffolding it to something more and more and more. So
yeah, exactly.
I don't know whether this work that I'm about to ask you about is to do with Upland Hills Farm, but I still wanted to ask you about it. And I've found out that you also lead family camps for children with ADHD. So I'd love to know a bit about this work, kind of what inspired you to start them and your experience of that.
Yeah, this is one of my absolute favorite weeks of the year, is a family camp I do with an incredible human being, a wonderful therapist and author named Ned Hallowell, Dr. Ned Hallowell.
Okay.
And he and I became acquaintances and then friends 20 years ago now. And another friend and colleague of ours, we were all talking one day and came up with this idea that how great it would be if an entire family had the opportunity to deep dive into the world of ADHD education. And Ned comes from a very strength-based approach, which was very appealing to me. Even before he and I met, but especially once I kind of learned what he was doing and how he was viewing ADD and ADHD. as most as a trait rather than a disability.
Mm.
And and that was highly appealing. So we kind of came up with this idea that whole families would come to this camp, and he would work with all the parents, and I would take all the students, all the children, and from there we grew it into this wonderful camp program that I think now will be in our 19th year this summer.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah, it's really great, and so the parents get an absolute, master class from Ned. There's really no kind of greater expert, I think, in the world on this subject than him, and his long list of books and best-selling books and everything else really attest to that. And then with the students, I have got a really great team of counselors and teachers, and our goal really is to not so much make it like school. The last thing a kid wants to do in the middle of summer is be pulled out of their life and taken to something that looks like and sounds like school, especially for these kids who, for a lot of them, school is not, their most favorite place or where things are
Mm.
working as well for them. So really what we try and do is dive into I think aspects of wellness and well-being that are so important for all of us, but especially so for some. So we talk a lot about play and physical activity and mental health and well-being and nutrition and sleep. And we do that by, taking them kayaking and biking for, different days. And we visit a local organic farm, and it's all highly experiential and interactive. So they get to, pull carrots out of the ground and eat them, and have, popsicles at the end of the day that were
Yeah.
made from the fruit on the farm. And so we just do a lot of really fun adventuring. There's
Nice.
a music component and a builder component. And so just really trying to get at all the things that we know they're likely to resonate with, things that they
Yeah.
feel are strengths, and kind of turn that thinking from hey, you've got this, quote unquote disability, you've been identified as having this problem or disability, which it feels to them so often,
Mm.
uh, and try and reframe that thinking into something that they can feel more sort of ownership around in a good way.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm ADD, but here's what that can mean, and it can
Yeah.
mean all these wonderful things that when there's self-awareness there and good practice can become great strengths, and I really love that that's become a more mainstream understanding in the world.
Oh, amazing. They sound incredible. And so, yeah, you said 19 years, so a long time you've been running them now.
Yeah, yeah,
How
yeah.
many
I can't
families
believe it.
come?
I'm sorry.
Oh, how many families come? Like, how big are the camps?
Yeah, so for us, the perfect kind of cap size is 100 total people. So that ends up
Mm.
being about 50 families,
Yeah.
typically. Um, and so, yeah, I'll have upwards of 50 students and children, and Ned will have about that many adults or parents in his group.
Amazing. That's
Mhm.
awesome. Really cool. And does that happen in Michigan as well?
It does. It happens in what we call the northern part of the lower peninsula of Michigan. So,
Okay.
which is significant simply in that it's absolutely breathtaking. It's beautiful there. It's
Okay.
right on Lake Michigan, and there's it's big national lakeshore sand dunes, and so there's wonderful water and beach activities and biking and tennis and hiking, all sorts of really fun outdoor pursuits. And it's generally beautiful and wonderful time of year up there.
Oh, amazing. Nice. So you've obviously got quite a lot of experience under your belt. So what would your advice be to educators out there who are looking to do things differently, either in the place where they're already working or if they're looking to start kind of a new project themselves?
Yeah, yeah, this is something we do have educators who will visit us, for
Mm.
this reason, to get some ideas and to share ideas. So I think first thing is connect. I think oftentimes if you have an idea for change or growth or something new in your school, and not everyone's there yet, or there's not a foundation for it already in place, it can feel like too big of of a mountain to climb, or you might feel kind of isolated around your idea. So I think first and foremost, there's huge value in just connecting, finding other like-minded educators, even if it's virtual, and connecting with them and sharing ideas and starting small. I've noticed that some of the schools near us who've wanted to adopt more outdoor education or more environmental education or outside time into their curriculum. It's one small step at a time, and I think a stubborn sort of resilience around bringing it to life is often necessary, and it's hard to do that alone. So to connect with others and see what's worked in their programs or their schools, or problem solve together. And there are those networks and there are those connections out there. And I think when educators reach out, there's a high degree of receptivity, on the part of others who are also doing the same thing or wanting to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a good place to start, isn't it? Because collaboration comes when people meet like-minded kind of souls.
Yeah, and if I could, I'll say one more thing about that I
Yeah,
think is really
absolutely.
important. And I think it's been hugely important here at my school. And I remember Phil Moore, the founding director, when I was hired, he and I spent an entire school year working together. So his last year and my first year, we worked collaboratively, which was an incredible gift to me and so helpful to me. And I remember him saying often, and we talked about this a lot, was that he felt like my generation compared to his was more in tune with the science behind the value in outdoor education and in play, whereas for them it was a lot of common sense wisdom. And
Yes.
he said it's getting a little harder with today's parents to just talk about it from that perspective, because sometimes it doesn't land as well. But he said you've got this is sort of neuroscience and research background, and I think that's what today's parents and educators need to know and need to hear more of. All of the ideas around imaginative free play and more time in the natural world, and the benefits of the natural world for people of all ages, but especially children. There's a mountain of really high quality research and science behind it all. So just know, to teachers and educators, you've got that, to back you up. It's as important as any research going on around literacy development or math skills or things like that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. Nice. Thank you so much for your time today. But before I kind of wrap up ask my last few questions, sorry, is there anything else that you were thinking that you might want to say today that we haven't kind of covered?
Oh gosh.
I mean, I'm sure there's a lot.
Well, this has been really wonderful. I just want to, while I can, thank you for this opportunity, and maybe I would talk a little bit more, because I feel like this is so important in the school where I am, and the perspective that I think I've gained over time. I mentioned my first real professional job was at a school for dyslexic learners when I was finished with college and graduate. And that was an incredible education unto itself, learning about how dyslexic children can learn to read and write and comprehend and all of that really well. And from a real strengths-based approach, watching kids do that and it transforming their lives. And then from there, going to a school that was a college prep residential high school for students who also had been identified as having some kind of learning difference, like dyslexia or ADHD or something that, of course, I think everyone hopefully knows now that that's not a component of intelligence, but it's more kind of a processing and wiring difference, which we all have. I think that when you look closely enough, that's true for everyone on some level or some scale. and I really enjoyed and loved that experience too. But what actually, one of the main things that drew me to where I am now is that I recognized all of the best practices that I had seen in these other schools and been a part of, that were for, and intentionally marketed and created for different kinds of learners, were also happening at this school, which everyone just called the farm school. And this was not and is not a school for any kind of particular learner. It's not for dyslexic kids or ADD kids or highly intelligent kids, that we know through testing and whatnot. It's for all of them. It's a
Right,
school
everyone.
for the world.
Mm.
And it's just reinforced my knowing, my belief that I feel is now a knowing that, it's the environment. If we can create an environment that is reflective of different kinds of students and their needs and their strengths and their passions and interests, then there doesn't need to be a school that is for any kind of kid. It's a school for children. And it's a school for the world. And so I hope that's where we can, as a large educational community, continue to move closer and closer to schools that work for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah, I love that. What a great kind of way to end. But yeah, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I know that you're probably a very busy man. But I've been asking everyone these questions just to end, because it's a nice way to finish up. And my first question, and this I think will make me laugh, because yeah, as I said, I'm sure you're very busy, so you probably don't find too much time. But how do you relax?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, and I think the busier you are, the more important it is to make sure you're finding that time and relaxing in a way that is truly restorative. So I find being with my family incredibly restorative and relaxing. And whether we're making dinner or eating dinner together, I enjoy that. I've been a distance runner for almost my whole life now. So when I do get a couple hours free on a weekend, I love a very long, peaceful run in the woods by myself. That's
Amazing.
something that feels very relaxing. And as someone with incredible, like too much sort of physical energy, anything that really tires me out physically feels really relaxing to me. So
Excellent.
that can be a little counterintuitive, but yeah, whether it's listening to good music or reading, kind of the things you might imagine,
Yeah.
and I do try to commit to making sure there's time for that, because it is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about reading, what are you reading or listening to right now?
What am I reading right now? I'm really looking forward to, actually, I'm not reading it yet, but I'm going to mention it because a mentor and sort of, well, he's more a mentor to me. Scott Barry Kaufman is, I love all his books, and he's got a book that I previewed a little bit called Rise Above,
Okay.
that's about to come out, and I'm really interested in that. And I've been sort of picking up for a while now, a couple months now, a book called How to Listen, that was written
Um,
by Thich Nhat Hanh. And so it's about deep listening and compassion and compassionate listening, and I'm really enjoying that. And then for fun, and it's also, it's more than fun, but it certainly is fun. There's a podcaster and author called Blind Boy, who's from Ireland, and he's written some books, and he's got one called oh my gosh, what's it called? Topographica Hibernia, and it's a collection of
okay.
just absolutely wild, entertaining, and thought-provoking short stories. So I really enjoy listening to his podcast and reading his stuff.
Oh, he sounds amazing. I'll have to check him out. Blind
Oh, he
Boy.
is.
Okay.
He's great. Maybe not for everybody, but he's one of a kind and absolute brilliant. Yeah, he's absolutely brilliant.
Amazing. And finally, why is being outdoors important to you?
Oh gosh, it's well, I think it's just our human nature. Like, I think it's so vital to who we are as human beings. And of course, we are nature, as human beings, we're a part of nature. So you really can't, one is not, it's inextricable, really. One is the other and the other is the one. And so I think that need for connection or reconnection to the natural world, to an environment that takes us kind of out of our own sort of ego or mind and reconnects us with something bigger and something that feels to me very sort of eternal, and has a value just intrinsically, just by being. I think for all those reasons, and I'm sure many more, the natural world is an incredibly important part of life and of daily life, and our connection to ourselves and each other and the world around us.
Amazing. Absolutely. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Rob. I've really enjoyed chatting to you.
Oh my gosh, Hannah, thank you. It was really a pleasure, and hope we get to speak again sometime soon.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. A massive thank you to Rob for coming to join us on the podcast to talk about all the work that he's doing at Upland Hills School in Michigan. I really enjoyed hearing about their approach to education, particularly their concept of a love-based education. I found it a really enjoyable conversation, and I hope that you enjoyed listening to it as well. If you did, as always, please do rate the podcast, subscribe to it, share it with your friends, do all the things that mean that more people will find it. We'll be back in a fortnight with another episode, but until then, thanks for listening.